Welcome back. When we left off, Odysseus was in the hall of Lord Alcinous on Scheria, telling his story to the people of the court. They decided to take up a collection and send him home with plenty of goods to make him rich, so they did just that in one of their own ships. Well, when Odysseus came home, he found a situation that was in pretty rough shape, and it seemed like the prophecy of Polyphemus had come true. What was the situation in Odysseus's house when he came home? Well, it's hard to say who was in charge exactly. It seems like Eurymachus and Antinous, the two chief suitors, were in charge of his home, but even that was hard to say. The rights of Xenia were honored, but in kind of a perverted way, in that 108 men were living at Odysseus' house, eating up all of his food, drinking all of his drinks, and sleeping with a lot of his slaves. And these suitors were from all over. Many of them were from Ithaca itself, but the rest, in fact the vast majority, were from different places nearby. So people had come from far and wide to take Odysseus' stuff. The fact that Penelope was caught in the trick of weaving her shroud and unweaving it every night probably served to her advantage. It allowed us to show us just how resourceful she was. It allowed her to come up with a new way of figuring out which suitor would win her hand in marriage. Penelope arranged for a competition whereby the suitors would have to string a bow that had once belonged to Odysseus. A bow she knew they were incapable of stringing because they weren't godlike in the same way that Odysseus was. Remember, these are people who come from the generation after the Trojan War. They're not as physically capable as men like Odysseus. And she knew that only Odysseus could string the bow. So she set up the competition. Meanwhile, Odysseus came home dressed up as a homeless man. And you can see here that he has a stick with a bandana hanging from it, holding all of his worldly possessions. And he had tricked the suitors for some time. They really believed he was a beggar and that he could not have possibly been Odysseus returned home. Well, soon enough, in Book 21, he reveals who he is. And in Book 22, he, with the help of Eumaeus the swineherd, a local cowherd, and his son Telemachus, kill all 108 of the suitors, save 2, who were blameless in the whole affair. And this gets us to the kind of guy Odysseus is. Don't forget that after it's all said and done, he doesn't just kill 106 men. He also goes to war with the parents of the suitors, killing at least one of them. And then, in the process, he also kills all of the slave girls who had been unfaithful to him while he was away. So, he's kind of tough to figure out. He's emotional about being home, but at the same time, there's a lot going on here with this guy. So I want to talk about Odysseus, the anerpalotropos that was promised on the first page of the Odyssey. He is a man of many ways. And let's talk about a few of the guises that Odysseus will take during the course of this story. There's Odysseus the smooth talker. We meet him in Book 6 when he first meets Nausicaa on the beach in Phaeacia. And here he's completely naked, but manages to charm her just the same. How does he do this? Well, by doing 2 things. He manages to compare her to Artemis, the virgin goddess, complimenting on her chastity. And at the same time, he alludes to the fact that she might get married soon, indicating that she's beautiful and eminently marriageable. Odysseus is quick with the word, and he knows exactly what to say. Why is he so good with the word? Because he's actually related to Hermes. And we can see that they share a lot of traits. Both are liars, both are thieves, both are smooth talkers, both are travelers, and both are seen as underdogs by others in their lives. It turns out that Odysseus' grandfather was the son of Hermes, making Hermes Odysseus' great-grandfather. And Autolycus, Odysseus' grandson, is described as the best man on earth at thieving and lying, skills which he had learned from Hermes. And he was the one who gave Odysseus his strange name. Odysseus' name comes from the Greek verb odysomai, which means I hate. And here's what happens after Odysseus gets this name. It's kind of like that Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue. There's endless punning on this name, and perhaps the name actually makes Odysseus tougher as a result. The gods often describe him as odious in a joking kind of way. Who looks out for Odysseus but Athena, the cleverest of the gods. And she is famous for presiding over a competition between Odysseus and one of the best of the Greek warriors at Troy, Ajax, when they argue over who gets the armor of Achilles. In this competition, Ajax actually advances a better argument. His reasoning is more sound. However, Odysseus, and can you tell that Odysseus is the one to the right in this picture? Odysseus advances an argument that, while not as logically sound, sounds better. So, Athena judges him the winner. Odysseus collects the armor of Achilles, and Ajax stomps off, goes crazy, and eventually kills himself. Which gets us to the physical appearance of Odysseus. And the Iliad, Priam says this: "He is shorter than Agamemnon by a head, but broader in the shoulders and chest, and he is roaming the ranks like a ram." That's it, just like a thick fleece ram striding through the flock of silvery sheep. And Helen says, yes, that is Laertes' son, the master strategist Odysseus. He knows every trick there is, and his mind runs deep. So he's not quite as good looking as the other heroes of Troy. In fact, I think he's downright homely in some places. But he's good enough looking, and he's talking gets him through things. This leads us to my second characterization of Odysseus, and this is sad, or Odysseus. Here he is sitting on the beach in Ogygia in Book 5, and he's crying his eyes out. He actually has like salt stains on his eyes from crying so much. And we see this moody Odysseus again in Alcinous Hall in the story of the sack of Troy. He was wailing so uncontrollably that he can't stop. We also get suspicious Odysseus. In the cave of Polyphemus asks him where his ship is parked, and Odysseus won't tell him, as he knows that Polyphemus has bad things in mind for him. Also, when Ino tries to help him when he's floating out at sea by handing him a flotation device, Odysseus thinks that the gods have a trick in store for him, and refuses to take it at first. Odysseus also shows up, is haggard or broken down looking sometimes. And this is an Odysseus that I like to call vagrant, or Hope Odysseus, as when we find out about his visit to Helen in Troy in Book 4, or when he first meets Nausicaa in Book 6. He's completely caked on with dirt and salt, and he's looking rough. He's looking like he hasn't seen civilization for quite some time, because he is. Later, he intentionally assumes this guise when he goes to his own homeland of Ithaca, and actually needs to appear worse than he is. Finally, we get Odysseus the master storyteller. Homer seems to have written himself into the story of the Odyssey in more than a couple of ways, with Demodocus and Phemius, the two bards. But don't forget, he has Odysseus doing a lot of the storytelling, especially in the books you read more recently, books 9 through 12. Odysseus tells his own story to us, and he does a great job of it. He's a master storyteller, and his storytelling is so good, in fact, that he convinces people to give him things all the time in this book. Stay tuned for my lecture on the hero pattern, and how this applies to heroes like Odysseus.